4, 3, 2, 1.
Puck short.
Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the One Puck Short podcast. It is Sunday the 13th of December 2015 and as always I am your host Rob McGregor. Joining me on the show this week, James Schall, the Director of Digital Distribution for SEGA Europe. He'll be stopping by to discuss the new version of Eastside Hockey Manager, which has just had its full release, as well as the Oxford City Stars and National Ice Hockey League season thus far, specifically the Stars, because part of James's role with the City Stars, or should I say with BBC Radio Oxford, is covering the club's games. So as I said, James will be stopping by to discuss both the Eastside Hockey Manager and the City Stars, as well as some National Ice Hockey League related stuff. But in NHL news, Pittsburgh fired coach Mike Johnson and replaced him with Mike Sullivan, who is now the fifth active NHL coach who's worked for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. He joins the ranks, which include Dan Balsma and Mike Gower and Michel Therrien as former Wilkes-Barre coaches. Sullivan's reportedly signed a 3-year deal to take control of the Penguins bench. Currently sitting ninth in the East, despite having Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Phil Kessel, among others. The Pens have scored the third fewest goals in the conference. Only Philadelphia and Toronto have scored less. A lot of people feel the way Johnson had the team playing is a direct reason for that, especially Sidney Crosby's downturn over the last 18 months. And he seems to be someone living potentially on borrowed time. He was a coach on the hot seat from the get-go, really, this season. And as I said, with the Pens sitting ninth, time just seemed to run out. And some people have jumped to his defence, saying that with the defence the Penguins have, it's not an easy job in Pittsburgh right now, because it's not a great group. Chris Letang is also sidelined for 2 weeks. He's clearly their most talented defenseman, but this isn't a particularly strong blue line. Rob Scuderi's best days are firmly behind him. Ben Lovejoy is Ben Lovejoy. Ian Cole is a solid NHL defenseman, I think. Ollie Matters had a decent start to his NHL career, but it's certainly not of the ilk of Chicago or St. Louis or anybody of that ilk, really. These serious cup contenders, which the Penguins' offense theoretically would make them, especially the way Marc-Andre Fleury has been playing recently. He's looked much stronger between the pipes, but the blue line's just not good and in terms of making Pittsburgh a serious contender. They don't have that number one go-to D-man right now. Letang struggled with injuries. As I said, he's sidelined, so they haven't got somebody to lean on in the way that other clubs, for example Boston, may have leaned on someone like Zdeno Chara in the past. So yeah, I can see why people may have jumped to Johnson's defence. It wasn't an easy task per se, but when you're struggling to get goals out of an offence, which includes, as I said, Crosby, Letang, Kessel, then questions can legitimately be raised, I think. The Penguins have lost Pascal Dupuis. He's decided to retire due to the medical condition related to blood clotting. He missed 66 games last season after being diagnosed with a blood clot in his lung. He will be placed on the long-term injured reserve, which does clear $3.75 million from the Penguins' books. So they've got a little bit more flexibility all of a sudden in terms of their cap space. How they use that remains to be seen. Can Jim Rutherford make a move? Well, that remains to be seen. As I say, it's not an easy market out there, especially for defensemen. That's where Pittsburgh seem to need the most help right now. But at least with $4.1 million in cap space, there are options perhaps out there for Rutherford to make a move. I think it's also beneficial that they now have Daniel Sprong in the lineup. He's regarded as one of the best young shooters in the league, and Dupuis' departure frees up a permanent spot for Sprong to come in. I know that was a particular sticking point between Rutherford and Johnson previously, that Sprong wasn't getting regular ice time and indeed wasn't even in the lineup some nights. So interesting times in Pennsylvania with the Penguins changing, and we've talked about the Flyers' struggles before, but if Pittsburgh can get it going, you have to think they might be a contender again this year. Sorry, a bit of a frog in my throat there. Alexander Semin has parted company with the Montreal Canadiens. He was placed on waivers by the franchise late last week, refused to report to the AHL St John's Ice Dogs. So went through the unconditional waivers procedure, had his contract bought out, and he's reportedly signed with Matigorsk Metallurg in the KHL. And kind of a strange situation. A lot of people were surprised when Montreal signed him in the summer, but on a 1-year, $1.5 million deal, it was a high-risk, high-reward type situation. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. I guess the risk ended up outweighing the reward, but I can understand why Montreal GM Mark McGivern went in for Semin in the summer. This is a guy who's been a 40-goal scorer before. You could say that if you get 20 goals out of him, he's been more than worth that $1.5 million to Montreal. But as it was, he had a goal and 4 points in 15 games this season. He was a healthy scratch on several occasions. And it just didn't seem to fit with the way Montreal were playing. He seemed to be hesitant in certain situations, whether that's as a result of previous injuries. And just his general style of play didn't seem to work with the Habs system now. So that strange relationship has come to an end, and one suspects Alex Semin's time in the NHL is also now at an end. As I said, he's reported to have signed in the Continental Hockey League, and most people expect him to remain there for the foreseeable future. Joining me now on the One Puck Short podcast, the Director of Digital Distribution for SEGA in Europe, James Schall. Hi James, how are you?
Good evening, I'm good, Rob. How is everything?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I haven't just randomly invited somebody from SEGA Europe onto the podcast to talk about Sonic and reminisce about our mutual love of the Sega Saturn. There's a very serious reason. Well, I say serious, I invited you on. Eastside Hockey Manager has been officially released on Steam.
That's right, it came out on the 1st of December. Really proud for that to have happened, but been a small part of the team that's put Eastside together over the last 12 months, and here we are with it now fully out to the public to enjoy.
Yeah, what inspired not just the guys at Sega, but obviously Sports Interactive, the developers behind it, the team, well, not directly the team, but the guys who make the Football Manager series, which is hugely popular, of course. Eastside Hockey Manager obviously came along mid-noughties, shall we call it, had a sort of a cult following and then disappeared for years. What drove the decision to bring it back now?
So going back to the sort of period when Sega brought out Eastside Hockey Manager, it was a time of for Sports Interactive, the makers of Football Manager, where they were looking at bringing in other sports, and they had a look at other sports games that were available, and talked to designers of them, got speaking, and really invested into Eastside Hockey Manager as a hockey product. Now, unfortunately, the way of the world in the mid-90s, which was all about physical distribution and shipping boxes around the world, Eastside Hockey Manager just didn't work, unfortunately. We couldn't get the right amount of copies in the right places for it to sell well enough to continue being an ongoing series like Football Manager, which is hugely successful.
Yeah.
So over the last... I would say it's been a strategy of Sega's over the last 5 years to sort of have a look at our heritage, have a look at what games we've got, and if there's anything in there that we can go back to and spend a little bit of time and love working with, then those are things we want to look at. And obviously, I'm sure we'll come on to the main reason I waved the hockey flag, but it's something I've been looking at. I've been in the games industry 21 years, had a lot of success with hockey products in the right places, and Eastside to me looked like a great opportunity. And Miles Jacobson, the studio director, also believes that, as did some other people high up at Sega. And, it's been a little bit of a test, a little bit of a taster of seeing how consumers would take to this hockey game. And we've been really quite pleased with the early results.
Yeah, I mean, is there a very specific plan for the future of Eastside Hockey Manager? Obviously, Football Manager releases a new edition annually. Is that the same sort of thing you're hoping for from Eastside, or maybe every couple of years with movements in the technology, and obviously rosters are always changing across the hockey world?
Yeah, so we're going to look at the strategy plan for Eastside, but our main focus for the game was getting it out getting it in such a way that we could make adjustments, changes, new additions, sort of bring the core of the game up to the sort of, it was out in 2007, so we had quite a bit of work to sort of modify it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we could do for Eastside Hockey Manager and add improvements and add things to it. So it's certainly not defunct of any list of improvements that we can do, but I think the key focus is for us to bring the game out and get people within the hockey community to love the game and understand the game once again. With Football Manager is a bit of a weird one because it's not really seen as a video game. Football Manager is a way of life for a lot of people. It's a simulation of football management. We don't really talk about it as a game per se. So a typical gamer might not pick up Football Manager. It may not be something that appeals to him. But Football Manager is part of football culture now. Yeah. Across the world, people know and play the game and debate tactics and think about who they should and shouldn't sell and etc. And we want that to happen with hockey. It's going to take a little while, but I'm hugely proud that there's a hockey product that I think is just stupendous to play. It's one of the best games I've actually ever played. And it's made over here in the UK. It's brilliant.
Yeah, as you said, the Football Manager is almost a phenomenon of its own. Both you and I play it quite regularly with our ties to our respective versions of the game. I'm still stuck with FM10. I just can't leave, and I know you're partial to Football Manager 13. But with the fantasy, with the fantasy sports growth that we've seen in certainly North America, there's Yahoo offer daily NFL games and things like that. There certainly seems to be a lot of scope for an ice hockey simulation in that vein.
Absolutely. I think one of the key factors in helping Eastside come back again has been the growth of Football Manager in the United States. There's a game that traditionally never really did very much in the US because of the whole soccer football thing, and people used to believe that football wasn't a viable sport back in the States. Now, I was working out in the US in 2006, and that was sort of the first year we really noticed in the sales of video games products that football, as we traditionally know it, was outselling basketball in the US. And that was a huge sort of penny dropping for many companies. That the United States is a market. Now, again, there was also the added thing of it being quite stat heavy. You'd imagine that fantasy football and fantasy sports would really engage with the type of product. And, that's something we'd love to sort of reach out and speak more and talk to people about. But I think the key thing for us is to get those hockey fans, hockey nuts, people who live and breathe hockey and know that's our core audience we want to go out and speak to first of all and get them aware of the product and enjoying it so much.
It's just slightly, I suppose, an odd market. Since there's not many ice hockey games out there in general, EA have kind of got the market cornered since the 2K series dropped out. I wasn't a particularly huge fan of the 2K series post. I think I had NIHL 2K, the original one, on the Dreamcast, but after that, slowly declined for me personally. They had some nice touches, but it was always about the EA series for me, and they've kind of had the market cornered on hockey games really for the last about 5 years, I guess.
Yeah, they have. EA, I remember going back to 1992 and the first EA hockey that came out, which wasn't licensed then, so they didn't have the NHL licenses, so they had made-up teams and made-up players. But that wasn't, the first time hockey had been put in video game form. I remember playing, really showing my age now, and many of you listeners won't remember these things, but like the Pong consoles that you'd be able to play Pong on, which was literally 2 lines on the screen. They'd add 4 lines and call it hockey. And then you'd move on to the Intellivision, which was a really very early blocky graphics version of hockey. And then there was a game came out in the late 80s called Wayne Gretzky Hockey, and it was on Amiga and PC. It was a top-down view, very similar to a game called Kickoff that people might remember. And it just brought all this wealth of stats. And at that point, the sort of action games, which NHL is all about that, it's about that action. They couldn't really add to that sort of deeper depth of sort of information and getting really into the nitty gritty and the gears of how a hockey team works and a hockey club works. But they've added in huge features and franchises, but the NHL series is all about that event. It's all about the action, and it's great fun to play. Although everybody I seem to come up against is a Russian who wants to play as Washington, and they're all picking Washington because of Ovechkin. But it's good fun. But the East Side for me, it's just that fantasy of being able to. In my head, I am the world's greatest coach, and I'll be able to hone that team and win the Stanley Cup or whatever league I've decided to play within. Within the game, there's so many different leagues you can add now with features which players can modify the game and add their own leagues and share that with the world. And there's a whole range of things on there, which is pretty interesting to see all those things apart.
Yeah, certainly you mentioned the sort of the editor function now. It's become a big part of Football Manager as well. And obviously we keep mentioning it because the comparisons are quite strong really with Sports Interactive and kind of the style of game. And that certainly that editing function is a big part, I think. And we've got websites like the Blue Line who've created face packs and logo packs and things so people can enhance the game as well with up-to-date logos and so forth. So that's a big part of the community, I think.
Yeah, and the community has been really a massive part of the game coming back to life. When we first announced it, the forums that still existed with a few people on rattling away, talking about the good old days of Eastside Hockey Manager. We engaged with them. We were really, really touched with the positivity from the community of players who just really loved being able to play the game again. And that was the main thing for us, is let's get this out, let's see what we can do, and let's see what the future holds for Eastside Hockey Manager.
One puck short.
Let's switch hats, James, because as you kind of alluded to earlier, your interest in hockey isn't purely based around a single game or games, as you kind of said before. You played some of the ones like Wayne Gretzky hockey when you were a younger man. You're also involved with the Oxford City Stars in the National Ice Hockey League, South Division 1. For people unfamiliar with it, it's basically the third tier of the British game. And Oxford have a pretty good season thus far. They're currently fifth as we speak today in the NIHL South Division 1, which I think might be slightly ahead of what people expected from Oxford this year. Recently beaten Victor, who are traditionally one of the stronger sides in the league. And just generally, things begin to be going very well for the City Stars at the moment.
Yeah, the club is doing really good things. I mean, about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, just as an aside, I'd sort of looked at what the Stars were doing. They'd recently become a Phoenix club, I suppose, in the way the club had entered difficulties, dropped down to fourth tier of British hockey in NIHL 2, was finding its feet and just needed a little bit of help. The players were playing in front of basically one man, his mum and their dog at the Oxford ice rink. And I just thought, when I iced for the Stars in the late 80s, early 90s, we were playing in front of 1,500 people in Oxpens Road playing Slough and Bracknell, and those were amazing days. And these players were far, far more skilled than we were, and they deserve better. So we put a little bit of effort into it. We got the crowds up, got the teams promoted, although I had nothing to do with the on-ice stuff. I was purely involved in trying to get bums and seats, and sort of handed over the keys back to the club about 18 months ago for them to carry on. They're in a really good place. They've got an excellent coach in Simon Anderson, who's doing the right things, the right ways going about stuff. They've got a very good core of Oxford lads, which is one of the reasons people have come to watch the hockey. Oxford fans really engage with the sort of local element, as opposed to it's ice hockey, come and watch it, which is a much more difficult ask. So when we set about remarketing the Stars, we made a connection with Oxford United Football Club and created a pretty nifty connection between the two sets of fans. The Stars changed their colours to be the same colours as the Pro Football Club. And, things have grown from there. But from the sort of squad size, they made some great acquisitions. Morsey joining over the summer has put a really nice, calm element on defence. And they've made a couple of great acquisitions with some youngsters, and they've made a goaltending acquisition change today, which is interesting. So keeping up to date of that while you're running around doing all your main business stuff is fun. But yeah, I don't have any involvement in the sort of playing side other than as a little bit of a hobby, helping out with the colour commentary on the live radio broadcasts that we do. So that it's all fun.
I mean, as you mentioned there, you work with Andrew Self on the commentary for Oxfordshire Sports Online and BBC Radio Oxford, home and away games covered. And to me, it's kind of part of the growth of the league, not just the club. I remember when the City Stars, say, went pop a couple of years ago, I was still playing National League for Milton Keynes then as one of the backup goaltenders, and a couple of guys came over from Oxford, because it's not a long stretch from Oxford to Milton Keynes, and Jake Flory was already playing with me in Milton Keynes, but his brother Josh joined. Mike Willock had briefly spent some of the time with the Thunder as well. But I mean, since the City Stars have reformed, obviously they've come up and seems to do a lot of good work in the community, and just in general the sport seems to be growing there, as well as in the league in general. Talking to people, I've got friends who play for Chelmsford who are top of the league at the moment and things like that. And you know, it's really positive, I think. As you said, the goaltending changed today with Tom and X coming in. And Tom's got a good pedigree. He was a Guildford junior, one of the stronger junior programmes in the country. And that's a really strong acquisition for the City Stars. And even Shane Moore, you mentioned, he was a very established player in the Premier League, the second tier, before coming down and joining the City Stars this year. And it's just... You know, it's almost like a microcosm of the good things that are kind of going on in general in the National League. It seems to be getting stronger. Teams like Streatham are getting stronger. And where Chelmsford, I think, are still the benchmark, but other clubs like Invicta and Isle of Wight, who used to be, you know, kind of in that top 2 or 3 with Chelmsford, and then there was everybody else. It's now a very competitive league, just from top to the bottom, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Stars famously decided to decline promotion a couple of years ago because they felt they weren't in a financial position to move up. And I think they did the right thing because they moved up with the backroom backing that they needed. Because it's not all about the on-ice stuff. You have to support stuff off the ice to remain competitive. It is very tough. You know, finding volunteers, I really feel for the guys. I wish I could put time in. I can't. And there's a bunch of people who are, you know, giving everything they possibly can to keep that club running and keep it running well, and hats off to them. But I think the sort of thing that's opened my eyes is how we're in a fairly big town, you know, in terms of the city of Oxford. It's not renowned for its sporting passion, but it does have a really core audience of sports fans, be it Oxford United or the Speedway or various things before that. And what we've done with the Stars, we've seen an incredible growth where the BBC, for example, and many local radio sort of outlets are saying we're the number 2 sporting attraction in the city now. And hockey has just exploded. We're getting 700, 800 people in. This was in NIHL 2, regularly getting, you know, big attendances in NIHL 1. We've had the Oxfordshire Sports Awards, which are operated by the BBC. The Stars won the Team of the Year. We've recently had 2 winners in the Sports Awards, which were held a couple of weeks ago, with volunteer awards for Chloe Smart and Gary Dent picked up Unsung Hero. The Oxford fans, I don't think they really care that it's the 3rd tier of British hockey. That's what's important. It's their local team putting out a really good quality product. That's fun to watch. And I think there seems to be too much focus a little bit in some of the sporting sort of discussions around hockey about, oh no, I'd never go and watch that because it's not elite league, or oh, I'd never drop down to NIHL. It's a pretty good competitive standard. And when you're in there with 300-400 other people all cheering and celebrating and enjoying the game, it's awesome. And some of the travelling fans you get, numbers of Streatham fans and Invicta fans and Chelmsford fans, brilliant. What an atmosphere. It's a really good microcosm. And for me, looking down at it, British ice hockey at that level is in a really rude health. It's great. What's going to happen, which will maybe put pressure on, is as teams try and go into sort of compete with Chelmsford, who are running away with the league, even though Oxford did beat them at home a month or so ago. It's using money to compete, and money you don't have or short-term gain could potentially put the health of the sport at risk, and that's the sort of thing as club owners and coaches and managers, people have to sort of figure out, and it's not an easy task. People want instant success, and not so much in NIHL 1 or 2, but it's really encouraging how professional the league has become, even though it is still deemed to be a developmental league.
I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the very short-term thinking that can go on at some clubs in some leagues. And I mean, one thing that's always stood out to me with Chelmsford is, although they're viewed as a big budget team, which is probably fair, they've also got a whole group of guys there who are Chelmsford juniors, Chelmsford kids, or they've come into the Chelmsford system as 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and then maybe gone to the Warriors in Division 2 and then stepped up to the Chieftains in Division 1. They've kind of followed that ladder with players like Breers, Hammond. I know obviously Hammond went away and came back, but these are local guys. Even Sean Easton, their coach, is a local guy who spent most of his career playing in Chelmsford, and that seems to be something which really pays dividends for the Chelmsford. And Cardiff traditionally as well. I know they had some political strife over the summer, but traditionally they were very strong because of those local players, that strong junior system. And to me, it seems to be something that's benefiting hockey in Oxford as well.
Yeah, certainly the regrowth of the club has been, as you say, by the sort of youngsters that it put out. And this is something that happened because of the situation the Stars were in, that a lot of those skilled youngsters went away to other clubs for a season while the club reinvented itself and have come back. And potentially the Stars, you would think, looking from the outside, I certainly don't know anything, and I, wouldn't want to comment in that way. You would think that the Stars would need some sort of backup at some point to push the gap between people coming out of junior hockey and senior hockey. When I first sat on the bench for the Stars at sort of 16, you did not get a lot of ice time. And in developmental time, that wasn't great for my own level of hockey. It really sort of blossomed as the Oxford City Satellites, which were then the reserve team, when the reserve league came into effect. And that's what you need to be able to have. You need to be able to have an environment where people coming out of junior can get to play with adults, but not under a really strenuous sort of divisional structure. It's a tough one to play because the hockey in this country is still, it's still seen as very amateur. Not many players get paid, if anything at all, and people are doing it for fun. And if someone's playing hockey for fun and they're sitting on a bench gathering splinters for 10 games, that's a tough one for a coach to handle. And there's so many different quandaries about what you do with our level of hockey and how you do it. People drift off into rec and drift back again.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, it's such a shame that so many players disappear at a certain age because they need to get that experience, need to get that ice time. And Chelmsford have done the right thing with people dropping into the Warriors. They've got a really competitive NIHL 2 team this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, those kind of links seem to benefit a lot of clubs. I don't know why more don't utilise it. I know you mentioned Gary Dent earlier. I know Gary quite well, and he was one of the people who helped Oxford in the past utilise rules basically which allow for, say, junior players at other clubs, if they don't have a senior club at a given level, say NIHL 1, well, then those juniors can partner up with, say, Oxford, so they can play at that level. And it was a way of getting young players more ice in a level they might not otherwise have been able to play at, potentially using it as a stepping stone to move to the Premier League, because that's the other thing we don't always see a lot of, is teams from the National League to the Premier League linking up. I mean, Cardiff did it with their Elite League team with some success. They've had a few depth players step up and advance, but you just don't see those kind of, I call them affiliate links, to more closely associated with what you see in North America with the NHL and the AHL and the ECHL. We don't see that too much here, and that's always something that's very much disappointed me.
Yeah, I agree. If I was at a level in a pretty high up team, put it that way, you'd want to be looking at expanding that ice time for your junior kids, because ice time is such a finite resource. You know, in Oxford, when I was playing for the Stars, we used to have a couple of training sessions a week. We used to be able to turn up for the reserves. We used to turn up for the rep team, just get lots of ice. Now the demands, and again, this comes down to the growth of hockey. There's 2 rep teams. There's the Stars. There's the juniors. There's 2 ladies teams, plus all the university teams. You know, they've got the Oxford University Blues. They've then got the sort of rep teams there and the ladies teams there. You've then got Bristol trying to play out of Oxford because they've got no ice. So there's just such you know, and you add in the public sessions and you add in the figure skaters. You've just got such an overwhelming demand for ice. You would think if you've got a talent who's going to talent will benefit from playing as opposed to sitting on a bench. Yeah. Even if you may just want to use him for 2 minutes a game, that is far better off just getting somewhere else and just get that growth, get that experience, because nothing teaches hockey better than people actually playing the game. Because no matter how many times you train fitness and match situations, it's that patience on the puck, it's that calmness, that all comes with match experience. And that's what our kids need, you know. And when I say kids, it's that jump between 18s and sort of 23, 24.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're on the same page on that one. I've talked about it on here before. James, thank you very much for joining me today to talk about both Eastside Hockey Manager and hockey in Oxford in the National League. Obviously, some positives there, some real positives. And it's always nice to be able to talk so positively about the British game, because it's not always sunshine and roses.
No, it's not. There's been a lot of stories recently and a lot of goings on to sort of watch on forums. No, it's been great to chat to you, Rob, anytime.
Thanks, James. Take care of yourself. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
One Puck Short is brought to you in association with Eastside Hockey Manager, an in-depth ice hockey management simulation brought to you by Sports Interactive and SEGA, developers of the world-famous Football Manager series, available now for PC via Steam. We've just about reached the end of this week's show now. Thanks again to James Schall for joining me this week. Just a couple of NHL news and notes I would like to finish with. Steve Montador's family is suing the NHL. The deceased former Chicago player had 5 concussions, some in very quick succession within a few days of each other. And obviously those injuries and head trauma have been linked to his untimely passing, unfortunately. As a couple of people have said, why are they suing the NHL and not an individual team? It's an answer I don't have, but it is a question I'm curious of too. I think it's going to be a difficult and uncomfortable situation for the NHL until some sort of resolution is reached. I'm not sure what that resolution might be or how this might play out, but it's certainly not a welcome news story for the NHL, which I hope to cover on Wednesday's show, but we just didn't get time to. But as I said, just a quick note there on that, more obviously as things develop. Actually on the ice, mainly some goaltending bits I just wanted to flag up. Sergei Bobrovsky has been placed on the injured reserve with a lower body injury. Obviously that's a hammer blow to a Columbus team which has already endured a very difficult start to the season. But on the positive goaltending side, Jake Allen now has a league-leading 4 shutouts. He's been having a great year for St. Louis. He shut out Dallas the other night, and I just wanted to give him some praise, really, because there have been times in the past where I've questioned his ability to be an NHL starter, but he's been tremendous this season so far and seems to have taken the Blues starting job to be his own. Braden Holtby also excellent again this season. He shut out Tampa Bay, 35 save effort there, and he's a guy who's really making his way up into that upper echelon of NHL goaltenders and joining that elite band at the very top that people look to as regular Vezina contenders, really. The final note I just wanted to mention, again, we touched on it very briefly on Wednesday, as the salary cap looks set to rise next year to around $74.5 million. And it doesn't seem to be in any danger of dropping either, so that continues to rise. And a couple of notable streaks that struck me: the Oilers and Flames have won the last 5 games, which is crazy given the rough patches they both went through. Obviously, Conor McDavid on the mend. The Oilers maybe could make a late charge, but I think it's still going to be too much to catch and surpass some of the teams ahead of them. But a couple of good winning streaks coming out of Alberta right there. If you listen to Wednesday's show, you'll be aware we have a competition running right now to win yourself a copy of Eastside Hockey Manager. If you would like to enter, it is not too late. Simply answer this question. Who are the highest scoring brothers in NHL history? So the highest scoring brothers in NHL history. If you would like to enter and win yourself a copy of Eastside Hockey Manager, just email the answer to that question to onepuckshort@gmail.com. If you wish to get in touch with the show, obviously you can email using the same address, onepuckshort@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at RobMcGregor35. You can find the blog onepuckshort.wordpress.com and like us on Facebook, facebook.com/onepuckshort. If you're so inclined, there is also a donation link on the blog, so you can help us via PayPal. It just goes towards things like running costs and hosting costs, our Spreaker account obviously as well, things like that, just to help keep the podcast and the blog running. There's also an Amazon affiliate link on the homepage of the blog. Basically, click on the link, it takes you to Amazon's page. You do your Christmas shopping the normal way. It doesn't cost you anything more, but we get a little bit of a kickback once you've hit pay at the checkout. Thanks again for listening. Again, thanks to my guest this week, James Schall, and I will speak to you all again very soon.